let me start with like looking into it. For me, obviously, as not being a digital native or anything like that, blockchain, crypto, metaverse, NFTs, there's so much new buzzwords coming, and it's quite tough to kind of really understand what is what, how is it linked together, and yeah, what is going to be the results, the impact for us and for the fashion industry. I heard obviously things about the metaverse, that there was directly problems, like people, especially women, in the waiting room even for the metaverse were already harassed and things like that. So I think it's really important that we look into it. And I know also, Kim, for example, you described the metaverse at the moment, or maybe the whole crypto-verse, whatever that all means, as basically a Wild West. So there's not that many rules, not many standards, and well, it can be nice to be in such an experimental space, but I guess for some experiences it can also be complicated. And so today I would just really like to set a first introduction to this topic for our audience and for us also, and to kind of continue this discourse really over the next couple of months and years possibly. And here at the summit we always like to look at everything from different perspectives so that we can really understand how things are interlinked. And so I would like to talk about fashion culture today. What does this whole development mean for the fashion culture? What does it mean for the fashion economy? And what does it mean at the end for the fashion product? That would be my game plan for this panel here now. So let's start with the fashion culture. And maybe let's start also with you, Dio, since you are our furthest away guest at the moment.
Sure.
I always have this one quote. It's not an 100% quote, but this kind of the meaning is, I think, what Amber of the Fabricant always told me was very clear. It was her fascination was also based on, in a virtual space you can ignore gravity when you design. So I thought that was something really that helps to understand why there is such a fascination also. So I would like to ask you, since you work with so many designers, you've been working on physical products all your life in the fashion industry, but now you also have been pioneering work with NFTs already. What do you think, what does it mean for designers really, these new opportunities?
Oh, it's a new world, and a new world offers new opportunities. And I mean, we've had some experience recently with creating NFTs for Fashionweek in Copenhagen for Division brand. And I can say that the designers didn't feel like they had so many roadblocks, especially with timing and drops and physical creation of goods. It's all done on the computer, which is amazing. I think there's a big difference between obviously an NFT and a AR VR type technology that you can, obviously put on social media and wear something. But we're actually seeing a huge movement in at the moment, or these NFTs that I think personally are aggregated and shared in the wrong way. Obviously, we as consumers look to buy them. I think the smart way to deal with NFTs is to rent them for a short amount of time, or to trade them. But yeah, it's a new world, and this new world is offering lots of new opportunities for designers, for brands, for retailers to jump into capitalism in a new way.
And who doesn't love to jump into capitalism in a new way? Maybe Kim, I mean, you are, I think, the youngest player here in this round now, and you have a very different approach. I hope I was allowed to kind of guess that. Sorry if I'm offending somebody. That wasn't obviously my intention. But I think, I mean, since you are still studying, which I know, and I know you have finished a few studies, this guest is fairly educated, I think. Sorry, I have to stop talking about this, I guess. You are a designer. What did this mean for you? Because you decided with your studio to only work digital, really. But obviously still you're also supporting companies that work with physical products. But yeah, what does this whole new technology mean for you? And yeah, which parts of it are you using most?
So first of all, I want to say that I come from the traditional creative process on fashion design. So I learned how to sew, I learned how to do patterns and garments. And I think it's truly a really cool opportunity for every designer to add technology to the creative process, because when we are in the classic process of making clothes, then we are so, I mean, we have a vision, we have a mood board, but technology adds a new kind of universe to it. You can change textures, graphics, and also what you mentioned with you have no gravity when designing digitally. That leads to a new, new opportunities of being creative, and I think that could really make a huge impact in the design step and in the process.
And how do you translate between physical and digital?
For me, as with the studio.
Yeah.
So there was kind of a very crazy situation. We sat in university and came straight from the sewing lab and thought about, hey, we are wasting so much material just to create in university and to play around, to learn. And of course, that's very important. But then we thought about, couldn't we do it without the material we have? And then one of our professors taught us the 3D software in the next semester, and then we were like on fire and thought, okay, that's a cool way and a conscious way to play around with all the different methods, but we're not wasting anything. So let's start with that.
Which is not a bad start, I think. Yesterday in our masterclass with Zalando, where we also talked about how to combine circular design strategies with virtual fashion, it was mentioned that apparently Nike had, or still has probably, more waste from their prototyping than from the whole production of shoes they do. So just to put things into perspective there, obviously. So in that sense, if you can get rid just of the prototyping waste, that would be immense already. Maybe going then one step further, not just from looking from the designer perspective, but looking more at the whole lifestyle perspective and what does it mean for us kind of humans. What do you think, Madeleine? What is all this technology bringing into like the whole creative space and making with us as well? I think all humans have some kind of creativity inside of them and some wish of expressing it. Maybe you can alter a little bit on that and also take from maybe where Dio left, and he said he was working already with NFTs so much and bringing new ideas into there. But maybe you can explain the ecosystem a bit more since you are building one.
So definitely, I think that something that is still relatively new is the amount of amazing talent that comes out of design schools and quite how many people are actually now creators in this industry. When we look back sort of over the last few decades, that's actually been something that used to be, the design side used to be kind of relatively small. It used to be like a little bit more closed off in different companies. And now what we see is this, over the last 50 years, there's been increasingly smaller and more independent designers. And so there's a trend towards how do we basically enable the creativity from different people to get either created or funded. And that means that there's probably going to be a bigger shift also for bigger brands of how do you actually recognize the authenticity of the creator behind those designs. And so are we going to have this sort of big design label in the future, or are we going to move towards ownership of IP? And I think that's where these two conversations really get interesting, because we have basically so much creativity, as you said. It's in fashion, it touches everything. It's also music as well. And the collaboration between people and retaining that sense of authenticity of the creation itself is really important. And to use something like Web3 now is super interesting, and where we're experimenting is how do you then get people to own that IP and own their creations and earn money from it in new ways, and maybe even change how the IP and the creativity can be monetized and produced. So this is some of the conversations we've had, Max, where it's looking at also this kind of data and how that creative curation data, not only in individual design, but people's feedback online. If you go on Tumblr, for example, it's kind of the old example, but you're giving that curation, and when we buy stuff, we're giving curation. And so if you can somehow get not only the asset of the NFT for an individual design, but also from the curation, and that's what sort of DAOs and stuff in Web3 is looking at as well. And there's a lot of innovative stuff with Web3 digital fashion happening exactly around this, is how do we co-choose what should even be produced and then split up the money that can be actually earned from that with different NFT models. And so this for me is where these conversations get interesting. It's a bit deep, but that's where my head is a lot, is how do we co-share this like split up IP, and how do you, when you graduate and do you want to set up your own studio, this is one example of taking that like ownership of your creativity. But can we do that in a new model that doesn't mean you have to go and work for another brand and not have your creative voice explored more? Can we use Web3 to help people create more? Yeah. And then even use that to understand what we should be producing, not producing a lot of stuff that's not got that quality of design.
Yeah. Well, that's immediate applause, obviously, well deserved. And well, so like, I mean, that's a massive impact on culture, on the working culture in the industry, on like how relationships work between designers and brands and consumers and everybody else, I think. So yeah, I can see the massive impact, even though I don't understand all of the details yet. What do you think then, I mean, if we look at the cultural space there, I understand that democratization and decentralization in certain ways are important aspects there, that I would claim also are sustainability aspects in many ways. Do you see something else as a potential positive impact on the fashion culture, really? Is it maybe, because I mean, I always feel like also the community behind, let's say, maybe 3D and gaming industry and so on, and or also programming, the software industry, it's, from my perception, it has a different kind of work ethics. It's a lot around open source thinking and acting also in relationships, I believe. But at the same time, I always feel, but they've also introduced a new way of blackboxing things away, because some of these things are getting so complicated that nobody else can really look into it anymore. So it's a funny ambivalence between being way more open in terms of sharing and at the same time having some even deeper secrets than ever before. How do you feel? Can this become a positive impact, like using these technologies? Can we really force this open source idea up on the whole industry through using more crypto technology, etc.?
So I think crypto has really been, in many ways, really badly educated, and that's something that we're working on with everything around NuCoin protocol, is how do you simplify this and how do you focus now on what applications are going to be built and empower people outside of crypto to actually use these technologies. So yes, it's going to have a huge cultural impact, but not if we don't get this educational part right, and also in the tooling, because you have a lot of things to consider when you want to start building in Web3. The first one front of mind is always sustainability. It's what impact am I having on this if I'm going to use something like a proof of work chain? It's really, you don't want to be associated sometimes to that as a brand either, because for bigger corporates, there's policies in place for ESG now, and that's a real concern for a lot of brands. But also on the sort of consumer and individual side, I think the whole fashion industry has done a huge job to change the mindset around even the everyday consumer, let alone the people who are like loving this and spending our whole careers and doing this. So you definitely have to consider that, and you need to work more on the side of proof of stake, which is exactly what we're innovating in. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you focus more on your product and your user experience and your values, like really having a strong community who believes in an identity. And we're seeing this, an amazing example of this is Mutani.io. I met with Anne in Berlin a few days ago, and what they're doing is really incredible because they're staying true to their creative vision and building up a community first, and having that cultural mindset of this is about ownership and this is about co-creation, and really working with their community about how do we solve this, not just an independent studio anymore, but thinking more of an early stage of a DAO or a community. And so that cultural shift is something that brands definitely struggle with. And I really admire the teams in sort of Web3 of different brands right now who are venturing into crypto, and they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff with NFTs, and it's great. But one of the biggest challenges, I think, is cultural, because the threat is the same threat that it is between big tech and crypto native companies, is you need to have that cultural and organizational agility and removing ego, which is such a strong thing in fashion when it comes to creativity as well, and actually being willing to let that curation process be governed by the community. And so that curation is the huge cultural difference, because you can no longer sort of have this one person dictating the trend book. When we're looking at some models, we're working with several amazing partners right now to support other entrepreneurs moving into Web3, especially in luxury and fashion. And some of their concerns are, how do we not become like those centralized brands? How do we stay true to this? And so I think if bigger brands want to really get on board with this, they need to be crypto native in their thinking in terms of Web3. And but I do think that we're going to see the rise of new big fashion brands, which are basically DAO franchises. So this is really, really interesting stuff.
Think about some of these things we need to talk in the next round, like DAO. I don't know what that actually means even. And I think also, but there was something else you said, but I think that's more part of maybe also fashion economy. Well, I think it's okay to be honest, being not knowledgeable
100%.
about everything. But maybe just to go into the next kind of stage, but still I wanted to have a last input on this from you, Kim, because I mean you just came out of, or still are in education, and I mean it did help you to get into the virtual world, but at the same time, would you say that you had a good kind of guidance into that, or is it more like you found your own way and that's the way forward at the moment?
So I was very lucky that my professor was totally into 3D, and she was like the first one at the whole university who was working with that. It was kind of like a pilot project with the 3D software we used, but yeah, it was kind of a rough start. So we learned very much at home by ourselves. We sat together at nights and nights and work, playing around with the different software. And it's still very difficult to work with different softwares because you need them. You cannot work with one software to create a digital product. And I wanted to add something to that what you said. I think that also the combination of digital fashion and crypto or NFT can make a huge impact on how we think of fashion, how we own fashion, how we explore fashion. When we're thinking about virtual reality or augmented reality combined with maybe NFT concepts where you can rent an augmented reality piece for several months or something like that, I think that will make a huge impact in the next few months, and more companies are acknowledging the benefits you can have if you have conversations like we have now.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for this great kind of also introduction to the fashion economy part of the talk. Because I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of what is driving the fashion industry, the economy part, the money. And so, if we now having this crypto digitization, so I mean, the industry is not even digitized yet, and now it has to become cryptonized. So what does it mean for the markets and for the value chains and so on? I mean, we have seen that the gaming industry in the last couple of years has surpassed music, entertainment industry by I don't know how many percent by now. I mean, I think it's 5 times the market already, which is nobody has really an understanding or has a consciousness about this, I think, so far. And now slowly the fashion industry, which is way more mainstream in a way still than gaming. I mean, gaming is very mainstream in the younger generations, but fashion is, well, it's really touching nearly everybody, if they're taking over now, the impact economical wise must be massive. So Dio, since I think you have been working like with so many brands already now, also with NFTs and so on, what do you feel is the impact on the economy, and what does it help to create, for example, also more independent brands already?
Well, brands are being created every day. We get requests for assisting new brands, pretty much maybe 10 a week, especially since the issues are happening in Asia with the ports closing. However, the retailers that we work with are now looking to get NFTs that match their collections that they buy from brands. So it essentially means that, well, for us, when we create NFTs, we get a technical pack, which is a simple thing that everyone gets to make the physical clothing. And we create the NFT from that technical pack. So we're trying to actually bring more business into the supply chain, let's say into manufacturers who make physical clothes can also now make the digital. So we're training them to do so. From an economic perspective, it means that we really have to reconsider how we're trading in NFTs as far as I'm concerned. I think we need to consider, as I said before, it's no problem for the person who's created the NFT to own it. But then the question is, I don't want to mention names, if I'm a luxury brand and the design technical pack is mine, but the work to that technical pack is done at the supply chain. However, that then becomes an ownership perspective. So at the end of the day, at the moment, if I'm a supplier, I make the clothes for a big brand, the big brand owns the clothes. That makes sense to everyone. The same thing should probably happen with an NFT. The question then becomes, from an economic perspective, what does the brand then do when they own this NFT? Right now, people are selling them, which I think is a big problem and a big mistake. I think the best thing to do is to rent them out and for the brand to keep an archive of all of these tech packs and NFTs. In the past, I've seen large organizations sell off their vintage collection and then they don't have a point of reference any longer. So you have big corporations buying back their reference material from the world. And I think NFTs could possibly go this way in the wrong way. We work with Rock Nation, for example, from a music perspective. They're interested in DAOs as well. They're also playing in the pond of renting out or sharing the ownership of music, like Nas has created recently, enabling people to buy in some of the rights to his music through NFTs. So from an economic standpoint, I think we just have to, I work backwards. I look at the problem that exists right now. And of course, if anyone's working with me, they're considering the environment. And I then look at the environmental issues. And I look at what does NFTs or DAOs, what can they do to fix these issues? And I think with incentives, we can figure out ways to ensure that the planet is not forgotten, but we can also make sure that we move into the next phase of evolution, which seems to be Web 3.0, DAOs, and NFTs. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, to a certain degree, for sure. Maybe, also we got one question from the audience which fits this very well. Maybe on the one hand, you could also explain NFTs a little bit, at least for a moment. My understanding so far is, and that weirds me out a little bit also in terms of how it's communicated, basically it's a contract. So, it's not a product in itself. So buying it is already a bit of a weird idea. But that's kind of one of the things where I struggle a little bit. On the other hand, my understanding is that NFTs could also be an interesting bridge between a physical product and a digital product. So it's kind of a connection point between these two. And then we got this question here, like, why would you say that renting NFTs is beneficial? So maybe you could kind of package that in some kind of a little try for an answer.
If you think of it this way, someone, like anyone on the panel, to be honest, if they are creating something or they know people who are creating digital fashion, for them to create something and sell it, let's say that they have a job with a large luxury brand and they create something unique for them. If they sell that, then that ownership goes to the luxury brand. I personally find that, so we work with Digital Fashion Framework, we work with Sogo World, and we work with some other people who are building NFTs and BNV.me, for example. And what we find is that if you are a large organization owning something and then renting it out for usage, is better, and it shouldn't change if you are a large organization or a small organization. If I was someone who's creating an NFT for a larger organization, I would ask for a percentage of that NFT, so that when that larger organization is smart enough to realize that renting it out is better than selling it, I'm still going to be receiving the dividends therefrom. So I think we have to look at new business models that help young people. I mean, I don't want to harp on the capitalist system issue, but at the end of the day, there's inequality that sits there. And one way to combat that inequality is to have a piece of the pie or to sit at the table. This enables a young designer or someone who is involved in NFTs to have an opportunity to sit at the table with larger organizations, instead of just saying, oh, here's the thing that like suppliers, they get paid a small percentage of the things that they create for a brand. NFTs cannot necessarily be different. And then the brand, the markup on some of the things I make for brands, sometimes I can't even believe it. Like how I make something for 20 euros and they sell it for 320 euros. So, it would be wise for me to say, hey, I would like to have a piece of that 325 euros instead of just saying, okay, I'll just take the cost of goods. No. So I think there's ways to look at this new system and make sure that we course correct and don't make the same mistakes that we made in let's say, the existing world in the new world.
Perfect. That's what was my thought to that. So the funny thing is that there seems to be still a lot of very traditional kind of process thinking and like business thinking being used for this new world, which works differently or could work differently. So I guess there's also an interesting friction then. And we will probably see more hopefully more new processes and new business models coming out of this. At least there's the opportunities now. So that's, I think, very exciting. And so maybe again, back to you, Madeleine, with also your ecosystem and your own blockchain on which one can build NFTs. First of all, maybe you have to explain what DAOs are. And then maybe you can combine that with something where I feel like I always wondered, will this now be finally the time when the so-called prosumer really becomes a relevant role? Because in the past there was always talks about it, and obviously one could always understand why that would make sense, but the communication flow between potential prosumers that are interested in giving feedback to designers, to creators, to brands, etc., that was never easy enough or like also rewarding enough maybe. But I guess there's really, with these new technologies, obviously communication flows can be totally different, gamified, be fun and easy, etc. Maybe you can tell us what are DAOs and if that vision of mine
the Web3 dictionary from my pocket. There's an article that we put up to explain some of these things actually. So DAO it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. The whole concept is that it's an on-chain organization. It has its own token, and if you're part of the DAO, you hold some of the token, and that can be to vote on decisions that are made in this organization. So there's a lot of innovation happening here, whether it's culture or art or a lot of fashion stuff is happening, as I said. But it's also happening to do with finance, to do with like every single theme. So that's why I think it's really going to influence stuff. To many extents, there's a lot of experimentation that are called DAOs that aren't necessarily actually blockchain DAOs. It's more communities, and they have the intention to go towards a DAO, which I think is absolutely fine, because you need to build a strong community and you need really an interest there of why would you work together? Why do you want to be involved with these people? You have the same mission, the same values, and you're working towards something important. But in terms of what is sort of the definition, we always try to refer back to that it's really on-chain. You can transparently see who has voting rights and who can contribute to this DAO. And you can also work for DAOs. A lot of people are kind of quitting their jobs and working for DAOs to earn different tokens as well. So that kind of covers, hopefully, the basics. How it's applied in fashion is super interesting because basically you can have different designers coming together, developers, such a different range of skill sets, and you can basically propose, let's work on this project, let's do this, etc., etc. And DAOs and NFTs in combination is super interesting because it's not only the rent model, as Dio was saying, it's also to do with licensing and how can we attach licenses to NFTs in order to think about not the current sale, but what happens with that IP over time, how could you monetize it differently? And that's how I think DAOs and fashion and NFTs is all really interesting because you could basically have, for example, Friends with Benefits is one of the best examples of what's happening in the DAO space right now, FWB. And basically they have this kind of model where everyone in the DAO has some kind of title or role or something, everyone agrees to it, and they have responsibilities allocated to them, and it's really great to see. But they are also working with brands. They're starting to actually have like a kind of franchise model in a way, which is super cool because if you apply that also to manufacturing, you can have basically you could buy the NFT as a manufacturer that has the correct license to produce stuff, and as long as you're working within certain guidelines, you basically decentralize your brand. And so this is like really awesome, I think, how that's happening. And so how do you do that? You need to standardize licensing. This is one of the things that we recognized early as well. So from building up the Newlife.io app. So this is it's a decentralized social network that functions as a shared computer for creativity. We basically focus on how do you coordinate creative ideas, and whatever that is. It could be fashion, it could be art, it could be startups, anything that requires a coordination and a sense of curation. And so we've basically grown with our whole community ever since. We were a community before we were an app. And we basically worked together and had hours and hours of developing, okay, what do we need this tool to be for us to work as a community and share our ideas, and what do we want from this thing? And so that's where UX and product is really interesting to kind of be in that space, because as long as you can know what people in the DAO want and what people who are going to use and interact with the DAO want, you can keep producing more. So essentially I see it as like agility, and how do you basically get to a point where you can be autonomous as an individual working for a DAO, and you can see all of the stuff on chain. You can even put the carbon impact on chain. So you can see everything, everyone knows what's going on, everyone knows what rights you have and why stuff happens. And this is, the best thing. I think there was a second part of your question I didn't maybe get to. But.
No, that was pretty good already as an answer, I think. I don't expect that we find final answers here, obviously. That's a learning journey, at least for me. But I think, there was some very important parts in there, which is, I think, one thing that really sticks for me is the term community and the new extreme kind of importance it really becomes in this world. And I think this is a tendency that also fashion brands have seen for a long time already, that the way how they used to brand, etc., and market is not the same anymore. And everybody is trying to build communities already, maybe not always that smartly, but trying. And I guess this is one of these keys, really, for the future. Brands will be depending on having communities, and really building the community is building the brand, more or less. And I guess, in this virtual spaces, that will be much easier. I'll definitely going to check out Friends with Benefits then to understand it a bit more. If we now look again, like into, okay, the sustainability aspect there, also in the economic impact, I would say, again, is strongly a cultural one, potentially. Different thinking on how to work together, how to create relationships, how to build communities, how to work between consumer and brand and producers, the supply chain, could be handled the same way we heard from Dio, but it could also be handled in a different way now because sharing is much easier, and in theory you can create transparency in a whole different way. You're not depending anymore of this kind of complicated audits that you do somewhere at the end of the world where you don't know who the person is who's going to do the audit and nothing. You can directly communicate always with all the stakeholders. So a huge shift. Brings me to the last kind of round of this panel, looking into what does it all mean for fashion as a product. And Kim, maybe you could start with one aspect that is the obvious one also, the energy problem. We already heard now proof of, how is it called? Proof of work is kind of the new kind of style of doing blockchains. It's more energy efficient, way more energy efficient, I think. But is that the only thing that you would take care of when you look into sustainability of an NFT, of a virtual fashion piece? Doesn't need to be an NFT, obviously. Or is there something else around it where you say, well, this is also important sustainability aspects of a digital product?
So I would say it is important to look at that, but we need to also take a look at creating digital products, because it is not the solution to just create digital products, and we need to take care of the situation by to prevent another mass market, because and that's because that's why I'm happy to be talking to you today, because we are experts on our thing, but we need to really talk to each other. Okay, where can we come together? Where can we create a digital product that also makes sense? Because right now I have some kind of the fear that digital creators are creating digital products, but that's not the point. We need to also go into the creation process and think about, okay, when I create digitally, is that okay in case of sustainability? What can I do in my creative process as a digital designer to not be 24/7 at the computer? Maybe I have designs that I used before that can be reused, recycled in the digital process. And that's the important thing for the future, I guess.
Right. I hope you should. Yes. Always, please. There's always time for applause. Well, you should know, since you are an expert on that, and I hope that also, like, this is part of the process. Obviously, finding out, okay, what are the important things? We are just at the beginning with this whole crypto world, obviously. Maybe one more question to that. Do you see there a potential in using probably NFTs as a new way of also labeling and communication of sustainability aspects? If we look into physical products, I have this vision that, well, you know, the hang tags and so on, nobody really looks at them anyway, and they transport a few information. Maybe nowadays they have QR codes, so you can get more. But I always wondered, like, maybe also this technology will be a new way of communicating, whatever information could be attached to a product. Are you working in that direction also already with companies or somebody?
I think that when we are talking about co-creation, that the whole NFT system can make a huge impact, because and also in combination to a DAO or some kind of community which is working together. For me, as a digital studio, a small digital studio, if I were in a DAO with many more digital artists, then I think that that we could use an NFT system to really co-create digital products, and to that we can share these skills.
Oh, okay, so at least like that would be kind of supply chain transparency in a way, I guess, or value chain transparency. I mean, I was also wondering if one can put even more information, I mean, all kind of sustainability information. For example, also the footprint of the product. How much CO2 was used, or was there some, I don't know if it's even relevant, but in theory, probably there's also some kind of water footprint behind a digital product if one really looks into the supply chain, etc. So I thought this could maybe be happening in the future. But maybe since we are getting short with time, I would like to go into like a last round or 2 rounds of questions for all of you. Maybe Dio, you could let us know, like, I mean, you've also been building your own digital products, and you've been, well, tricked by companies apparently into doing cheap labor for them, which I'm a bit surprised, and I thought you really know this game already. But always good to know this it's a never-ending learning journey, yeah. But I wonder, do you have like a favorite virtual product at the moment, being built by yourself or by somebody else? What would you say is like at the moment the most exciting virtual fashion product out there?
Wow, that's a very hard question to answer.
That's why I'm giving it to you.
I think, yeah, I think overall what I'm mostly excited about is, I think you mentioned in the beginning that this is the wild, wild west, and you can take that as a positive, you can take that as a negative. I tend to take it as a positive, and I think of, all the things that can be rectified that are currently in disarray from this carving out of a new way forward. At the moment, I'm really excited about, the possibility, because I think, some of the other panelists can talk about this probably with more insight, but, the metaverse is not here yet. We're not, and when I think further back about, the cell phone or the internet and how it was all a bit of a wild, wild west itself, and it all settled down, and now we use it to our benefit. And I'm hoping that, you ask questions about if we'd be able to get more insights on tagging, on a bit more transparency, essentially. And in my mind's eye, I'm thinking that having this type of discussion could be happening in the metaverse in the future. And maybe, having more clearer communication. I'm thinking of the problems that exist today that can be solved with the metaverse. So the things that are exciting to me is definitely the DAOs. I can't speak a lot about it, but I have a lot of energy that's being put towards 2 large organizations who are creating a DAO that is really bringing a bit more equality to the table, which is one of the biggest issues that I think we face when it comes to the environment. But they're doing it in a way for good, and they're doing it in a way that doesn't think about monetization first, but it thinks about people and planet first. But it's in the realm of what I just spoke about, where they're looking at the practical ways of dealing with the metaverse instead of looking at how to monopolize or to monetize it in a way. So yeah, that would be my answer.
DAOs, yeah, I see. The next panel will be about DAOs, I'm pretty sure. I mean, not now today, but next time we're gonna meet, I see there's a necessity to really look much deeper into that part of this whole new crypto world. Well, thanks for this. Maybe since really we are running out of time now, and I also wanted to have like a final statement from all of you. Maybe we can turn this around a little bit into like a last question that is focused just like on your really personal idea of a positive vision for the future. We've been talking last 2 days here on the summit all about regeneration. How can we create systems that help to repair what we've kind of destroyed as human beings on this planet? And do you have any idea or a vision how crypto technology can help to kind of envision and also implement ideally social and culturally restorative fashion systems?
Maybe I can answer the question from the perspective as a designer. And I think just creating digital is the first step, because you are not wasting the materials you would have used the days before. So I think using 3D technology and adding that to a designer's workflow is the first step. And then combined with crypto, I think you can answer the question better than me, is the next step?
Yeah, I would say one of the major opportunities with crypto is this sense of individual empowerment, and that the thing to think about is also how do we regenerate like this mindset about the creative value of every single person. It's cheesy, but it's true. And that's the thing that I find so inspiring working with other creators and entrepreneurs in this space. When it comes to how can industry play a role in that, these are all topics we've been very, very close with when we were accelerated by Farfetch and NVIDIA. We were playing a lot with data and looking at this model of, knowing what you should produce before you even produce it. And we basically need to flip the fashion system inside out, and we're not producing for economies of scale anymore, we're producing for quality. And if we can get the coordination of that right, and we can empower people to create IP and monetize in different ways, and then produce in more on-demand ways at scale, I think this is the way we can avoid producing waste and also connect, the whole conversation about connecting recycled textiles and all the people working in this side of fashion into the Web3, and how do you then produce these ideas locally with regenerated textiles is really interesting. So a bit of a coordination is needed, and data, I would say, is the core of this, because with that you can really know what's going on to flip it inside out.
I don't have much to add to that. It was a very long last sentence, but I think a perfect one for this panel, really. I want to thank you all for this really, really exciting input you're giving us here and our audience online. And really, we have to continue this discussion, and I guess next time more about DAOs. And yeah, thank you so much.